Hello, my name is Patricia Greenberg, and I'm here to present to you about the invasive plant management certificates for landscape professionals. And this is an introductory overview about the certification program that is being offered through the Fairfax Tree Rescuers PRISM, the Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. I am so thankful that you all are here today because it's such an important certification, such important information for more people to have in our region and really in the United States. So thank you for being here. I look forward to speaking with you about this topic. So the Fairfax PRISM Invasive Plant Management Certificate is for individuals. There's two different types of available certificates. So it's really for individuals and not for companies as a whole. And the two options are, one is for vines and shrubs, and then the other is trees, grasses, and forbs. So these are going to be offered at different times. They're going to both have online versions, and I'll go into more details here in a few seconds. And there, yes, they'll have online versions. So yes, so today, for instance, you're going to be doing the first session, which is the introductory session. So these are the requirements for the Fairfax PRISM certificates. And there will be online modules, like I mentioned. They're going to be about 2 to 3 hours per certificate. So for each of the categories that I mentioned, there will be an online version, and that will be self-paced so that you can take the time that you need to listen to the video. And then there'll be quizzes afterwards to help with certifying that you have studied the material. Then there will be in-person field trainings, and these will also be 2 3-hour field sessions to be able to cover all of the topics of the vines and the bushes and ground covers. And so for a single certificate, there's going to be 2 3-hour trainings or 3 field sessions for both. There is a small fee for the certification, but not too much, so that we can get more people than less taking the certification. Well, really quickly, I want to introduce myself. My name is Patricia Greenberg, and I am an ecologist with the Fairfax County Park Authority, and I am the program manager for the Invasive Plant Management Program. I am originally from Venezuela and worked for about 10 years with the Reston Association as the environmental resource supervisor there. And that is where I learned more about invasive plant management and ecological restoration. And I came to the Park Authority in about 2018 and worked as a natural resource manager at Eleanor C. Lawrence Park. And from there, I moved into the invasive management area program with the natural resource branch of the Fairfax County Park Authority. And then when the bamboo ordinance came through in 2023, shortly after that, a new position was created to help with managing the funds that come from the county to help manage the bamboo on the Park Authority land. And that is a position I am currently in. So, what is the big deal? What is the importance of invasive plant control? Well, here in this photo that I added is a image of why this is so important. We have these beautiful spring beauties and trout lily. You can see by the patches on the leaves that they are being quickly taken over by lesser celandine that has a sort of yellow star-shaped flower that is also very pretty. However, the celandine is creeping in, and the way this plant grows, it pushes out and stops the growth of other plants in those areas because it grows like a carpet. And you'll see a photo of that later. So it's so important to start working. And this is why we need more companies doing this work right now to help us with controlling the spread of these invasive species. Well, what are invasive species? They aren't inherently bad, but in certain circumstances, they are plants that are causing harm. They're non-native plants that are causing harm or have the potential to cause harm to a given ecosystem. They were not originally from these areas. They do not evolve. They did not evolve with our wildlife or other plants. And because of this, they cause harm to the ecosystem. They can also cause harm to human health. Yes. Well, for one, we'll talk about this, but invasive vines, they will cover trees, and we need trees to survive on this planet. And so this can directly cause harm. Many of these invasive plants can also reduce the health of water. So the water quality in our streams and our bay are also being impacted. And then in the end, they also have a major harm to the economy. Farmers are dealing with invasive species left and right and spending millions. Yes, farmers are spending millions to manage invasive species. So what's the difference here? Native plants are the ones that did evolve here in the United States, in this region of the United States, and they evolved with our wildlife. And so our wildlife require, many of them, specific native species to survive. Non-native plants are the ones that evolved somewhere else, and somewhere else is where their predators were left behind to keep them in check or keep them under control. But not all non-native plants are invasive. But all invasive plants, yes, are non-native. Even though they may be native to the Western United States, they're not native here, and then they have characteristics that cause them to be very aggressive. Like this. This is that lesser celandine with that star-shaped yellow flower that I showed you earlier. And here you can see what I'm talking about. It's growing like a carpet, wall-to-wall carpeting of lesser celandine. Nothing else can come up, especially not our delicate spring ephemeral plants that only grow at a certain time of the year, which is at the same time that lesser celandine is coming up and blooming. So without management, they get out of control and they take over the whole area. And yes, here's a great image of kudzu taking over trees and killing them. Invasive vines, not just kudzu, but other ones I'll show you soon, take over trees, can cause them to top off, branches to break, weaken the root system, and the trees will die. So how does this cause harm in the ecosystem? Well, we know that our ecosystem requires certain species to survive. There's a study that was done on this chickadee and how the chickadee babies, the nest of babies require insects to thrive, to grow, to be able to fledge. And the study showed that if a certain neighborhood around this nest, a certain distance, did not have at least 70% native species, those baby birds would not survive because the mother and father birds could not find enough insects which require native plants to grow on, to feed off of, to feed then the baby birds. So these invasive species are basically ecosystem disruptors, right? They outcompete the native plants for survival, and they grow over top of the native species, and our native insects do not prefer them. They will crawl right over an invasive vine to get to that native cherry tree to be able to eat those leaves. And so it's really important to make sure that we're maintaining and planting at least 70% native species in an area, in our landscaped areas. So yeah, we are losing major access to the parks. These invasive plants are taking over quickly. They have characteristics that cause them to be advantageous. For instance, they didn't evolve with deer, so most invasive plants the deer will not eat, and these plants will then continue to take over while the native plants are being eaten. These non-native species also have really aggressive characteristics, like producing copious amounts or really large amounts of seeds every year. They're the first ones to green out in the spring. So when early spring, when you're out and about and you see green in that understory, you can be certain that unless it's a holly or a native evergreen, which usually are only hollies, the rest of those evergreens are non-native species. Hmm. So then we're losing access to our parks. This is one park called Justice Park in Falls Church, where we have had volunteers come through year after year, and they've taken out these invasive vines. We've supported them with some herbicide treatment to get these vines under control. They continue to pull them, and they have planted native species and really helped restore this area and put a trail through this area so people can actually walk the park and enjoy it. But so many parks in Fairfax County look like this, and a lot of those invasive plants are coming from, well, we'll see, nearby neighborhoods. And so, yeah, here's the question. What are the sources of invasive plants? Can somebody tell me what are these sources of invasive plants? Yes, you're right. The gardens and the landscape beds next door. Most of the parks in Fairfax County that are really unhealthy or have invasive species dominating the natural area are because they're really close to neighborhoods, and where these neighborhoods are developers or the neighbors have planted and chosen invasive species like Nandina or heavenly bamboo in their yards, and then they've spread into the neighboring area. So other things like butterfly bush can also be really aggressive. And some of these plants also came either by accident, but many came on purpose, like beefsteak plant or garlic mustard. These were brought over for eating, and other plants were thought of as good erosion control or good wildlife food, like autumn olive and bush honeysuckle. And others were thought of to be good animal forage, like Johnson grass, an extremely aggressive, tall grass that can really quickly take over along the forest edges and in sunny areas. And others, like I mentioned, came accidentally, like Japanese silkgrass, which was brought over in packing material. So, landscapers, you are a powerful gatekeeper. You have the influence on what gets planted at scale. Landscapers and landscape designers are making these plant choices that shape the local ecosystem for decades. If a landscaper is choosing to use a new and very pretty plant that is being now sold at the nursery without investigating its tendencies for spread or the production of seed or how it may grow and how it may spread, then they could have the potential of choosing one of those new invasive species that will take over the natural area nearby. So it's really important that we take a look at some substitutions to see what alternatives are out there that may not have these aggressive and invasive tendencies. So if we're taking time to make these decisions, you can really have a big county-wide impact because the seed source in those landscape beds and gardens can have an impact countywide of either a spread of native species or a spreading of invasive species. So the photo here is of a serviceberry, which is a native plant that can also provide great bird food and also is edible for humans. So you're not only just the landscaper managing a landscape bed, you're also the steward of the urban forest because of that big impact that you have. So your client's expectations are, one, that you are helping provide a wildlife value for their natural air, for their garden beds, or for their front yard or backyard. That you're helping to provide a pollinator garden or a native garden. That the landscapes are going to be low maintenance and sustainable landscapes. And by installing invasive species, increasingly this puts landscapers out of sync with the market because it is a growing need. More and more people are interested. This public awareness is increasing. There are campaigns about using native plants, and this is a really great opportunity for your business to grow. So boost your company's credentials. Help support this effort by getting your employees and yourself the certification so that you can learn and be able to provide this service. Invasive removal is still a niche opportunity. We do not have many companies that are vying for the opportunity as a contractor, for instance, of the Park Authority to remove invasive species and help us with managing our natural areas. Not only that, but having this new skill or knowledge, getting the certification so that you and your employees are knowledgeable, provides a lot of winter work. Our contractors that we do work with now prefer to do a lot of the work that we have assigned to them during the winter months because, well, one, it is easier to identify some of the plants in the winter, and also there isn't that much plant debris, poison ivy, other things. And really, for companies, it's stabilizing. It allows your employees to be working and receiving and sticking with you year round. It's cost effective also to do some of the work in the winter and more efficient. So it's a business opportunity and not a restriction. Let's see. Forward-thinking landscapers can market invasive free and native forward designs, align with the county sustainability goals, differentiate themselves from other competitors. When you have the ability to talk with a resident who is interested about how using native plants can benefit the songbirds that they might enjoy, or the butterflies or hummingbirds that they might like to see coming by, this is going to differentiate you from other landscapers that are there to just do the cutting and the weeding and the mowing. So this will help build long-term client trust. And to offer this service, you'll need the ability to identify invasive species. It is key to be able to know the difference between a native and a non-native because some of the native species at certain times of year may just look like any other weed. So really important to know the difference and distinguish them so that you know what to remove and what to keep. Have an understanding also of the various control methods, which includes the time of control, which methods work for certain species and which work for other species. And so quickly now we're going to go through the various most targeted invasive species, starting with the vines. Now, there are many other vines that are not included on this list, but these are some of the more aggressive and maybe some of the more common invasive vines. So porcelainberry, and of course, the future trainings will go more into depth to help you with the keys for identifying these invasive species. And then, of course, the field training will help you get the hands-on so you know the difference. Porcelainberry may look a lot like our native grape, and our native grape in the right situation can provide really great bird food and be very beautiful for the resident. But porcelainberry are sometimes those vines that can grow underneath the bushes or within a holly tree in your landscape, and that's something that you really want to quickly get a hold of and control. Of course, English ivy, very, very common in our landscapes and something that people have to battle for years to come. And winter creeper, another very common landscape plant. Both English ivy and winter creeper can grow like a carpet on the ground and can cause harm to the trees by weakening tree roots and the bark of the tree. Other vines include wisteria species. There are two kinds, Wisteria floribunda and Wisteria sinensis, both really, really aggressive. It can penetrate the walls of the foundation of a building and become a massive and tremendous issue to control. Kudzu, very common further in the south of Virginia and has spread quickly all the way up to Canada. Something that is, once you know it's there, you really want to quickly control it. It grows super fast and can cover trees as we've seen before. So five-leaf akebia, this is a newer invasive. It's also called chocolate vine. It's a newer invasive vine, and where we see it in our forest, it quickly dominates the trees and the bushes and the understory, and something that you really want to quickly control before it takes over. Mile a minute, this is a annual and something that is also very aggressive with those little tiny thorns. Those equilateral triangles makes it really easy to identify. And this is an annual, so you just pull it out every year, and over time, it'll stop producing seeds. Japanese honeysuckle, very common vine. This one will coil around your trees and get on top of the trees and dominate that, but a lot of times we see them on the understory. Round leaf bittersweet, very aggressive vine, also coils on the trees, can get very, very, very large and can suffocate and grow over top of shrubs and just dominate and kill trees. So now we'll move quickly through some of the invasive shrubs. Autumn olive, this one was brought over as a wildlife food and erosion control. The bottom of the leaves have a silvery color and it produces red berries, which are junk food for birds. They do not provide the same nutrients as our native shrubs provide for our wildlife. Bush honeysuckle, also used for wildlife food originally back in the 70s, I think it was brought over. Very aggressive, dominates a lot of our forests. And again, also those berries are junk food for birds. Really easy to identify in the forest, especially in the winter because of its light khaki bark with the stripes going up and down the bark. Multiflora rose, of course, you can see why people wanted to plant this so much. Also very aggressive. It's a rose, so once it spreads a branch, it re-roots down and then spreads up another bush. Very aggressive. Barberry, Japanese barberry, or as I like to call it, invasive barberry, very typical landscape plant with some soft thorns and lots of red berries, and also linked to Lyme disease because it harbors ticks. And so ideally we are not planting this one, but I know a lot of people like it because you can get it in a variety with reddish leaves. Once it escapes into the natural area, it loses that reddish leaf ability or characteristic, and you see it usually just with the green leaves in the forest. Burning bush, however, keeps its beautiful red fuchsia color that people love so much, and very, very aggressive with the many red berries. There is a native Euonymus americana, which is a beautiful native shrub that has really cool red seeds as well. But this invasive shrub, super typical landscape plant, and tends to dominate the forest nearby. So also really unfortunate that that one continues to be planted. Leatherleaf mahonia, also a newer invasive, but it is invasive where people have planted it in their yards. The leatherleaf mahonia has a native variety out in Washington and Oregon and that western coast, and they grow short there, but here the leatherleaf mahonia grows very, very tall and very aggressive with the tons of little berries that are produced there where the yellow flowers are. There are many viburnums that are extremely invasive in our region, and linden viburnum is one of those. It has red berries. You see it in the forest spreading everywhere. People love the viburnum varieties because of their flowers that they produce every spring are just gorgeous. And we're dealing with one called leather leaf, I think mahonia. Or not leatherleaf mahonia. What I can't remember the name right now. It's out in Alexandria and it's a very aggressive one, but we have a variety of others, like double file viburnum as well. Linden viburnum is another, and there's Siebold viburnum, which also has a smelly bark, or when you break the stems, it has a smelly, a pungent smell that releases from the plant. But this one, really important that people are watching out for what viburnums they're purchasing because there are beautiful natives that could take their place. Privets, really typical. They have been used for over 100 years, and so of course we're seeing it all over our parkland. Then wineberry was originally brought over for agriculture to produce wine from these delicious berries, and it grows like a rose or blackberry where it spreads a vine out or a stem out and it will reroot and then keep growing and spread. So now we'll move on to some of the invasive grasses. Wavy leaf basket grass was brought over as an ornamental in like a basket planting and produces lots of seeds that are sticky for a certain amount of time, and that stickiness gets on clothing, on animal fur, and therefore it has really quickly spread throughout the parkland and on homeowner property. And so important to keep an eye out for this one. Miscanthus grass or silvergrass, people really enjoy it because of its little beautiful tufts of grass, but those tufts produce lots of seeds which have spread all along the utility lines, along roadways, and is just dominating some areas, especially some sensitive areas where we have some really nice, healthy, sunny areas where we are trying to protect some rare native species, and this plant is just creeping in. This is that Japanese steelgrass that I mentioned that came over by accident in packing material. It produces lots of seeds. Even if you cut the plant very short, it will still produce those seeds. And it has a vein, like you can see, that is like a shiny vein down just off center on that leaf, but easy to identify that way. Other grasses, of course, include running bamboo, which is the plant that I'm helping to control in Fairfax County. Big problem, definitely if you want a resident as asking to put in a screen with bamboo, put it in a pot, put it in some sort of liner that it cannot escape so that it does not creep out and beyond, because the rule is you have to keep it on your property. And yeah, bamboo will grow above ground as well as, 18 inches or so, even more below ground, depending on the species. So now we have a variety of fountain grasses growing in Fairfax County because people enjoy planting them. However, with these tufts of seeds, again, this plant has become extremely aggressive. And there's a story about a farmer in southwestern Virginia where their pasture has been completely taken over by fountain grass and the cattle have nothing to eat. Major, major problem. And so hopefully less and less people are buying this and planting it. Calorie pear has been around for many years now, and we know as landscapers and arborists that calorie pear has a very brittle bark. As it gets large, at least at 30 years or so, it'll start breaking off and becoming real problematic. It produces tons of little seeds, fruit that the birds eat, also junk food for them, and it has spread aggressively throughout our roadways and open spaces along roads and other natural areas. Big problem. Tree of heaven, because of the spotted lanternfly, which is an invasive insect that prefers the tree of heaven, there is some funding in the county to start managing this, so we are working on it. However, it's hard for homeowners to have to remove this tree. If this tree gets damaged or cut without the use of herbicide immediately on the stump, the plant will send out a chemical response and send out lots of new babies through the root system. It's a very aggressive tree, hard to control that way. White mulberry. There is a native red mulberry, but these plants have now hybridized and it's hard to tell between the two, but another invasive species that people enjoy the berries. Again, lesser celandine I mentioned before. We have Japanese knotweed. This one really enjoys areas along the streams or in wet areas, but it will grow anywhere. And there are stories of people dealing with this out in England and trying to manage this because it grows similar to bamboo with very aggressive root system. It's a really tough plant to take hold of. So if you're seeing this plant starting to grow in somebody's yard, it is really important to manage it right away. So with the certification, you'll be going through more of these details to help you with identifying the invasive plants, because it's important to have basic ID skills to be able to know the difference between one plant and the other and the species, and also with helping knowing how to manage the plant, how to control it. Is it a perennial? Is it an annual? How do I take the best steps to manage it? What are the herbicides I can use? But first, again, super important to learn how to identify it. And there's some really great tools out there now that have been developed over many years and that have been are used by many, many scientists, many land managers for managing invasive plants, identifying the invasive plants or other things like insects to help you identify it. So you can use this QR code to download the iNaturalist app. iNaturalist, well, you'll see it with this little green and white bird, helps you to identify the plant when you take a photo of the plant, trying to take multiple photos of the one plant to help the app identify what you're looking for. Sometimes it'll give you options of the species if it's not certain, and then you can use Google to help you pick out which you think is the right one based on the other characteristics that you're finding. And this app actually helps land managers with managing new invasive species. So if we're seeing this perhaps in a landscape bed, then we'll know that a new invasive will be taking over the natural area shortly. And it helps us manage that. So there's also really great little cheat sheets to help remember the details. And this is invasive cards that the tree rescuers or the plant nova natives have created on their website, and it gives you a lot of the details for how to identify the plant. And here are the QR codes for both the Spanish and the English version. The Vine ID tool. This is another great tool on the Plant Nova Native site, and you can use the QR code to find the English and Spanish version. And as you can see here, it goes into lots of details about how the plant grows. It gives you lots of different photos to help you with learning how to identify it. It even has a fact sheet and a video about the plant. So lots of resources here to help you with identifying and knowing what you're looking at out there. The Blue Ridge PRISM also created a great tool to help you with invasive plant ID and even with tips for how to control those plants. This is still only available in English. However, it is a really great tool because you can click on the photo to enlarge it and get lots of information about those invasive plants, and also how to manage that plant. So what do we see here? What are we looking at in this situation? We can see that this is along a utility line and there are lots of things going on. So this photo is courtesy of a village, Lafayette Village HOA, which is out in Annandale. And the utility lines are in the RPA, which is the Resource Protection Area along 495. And this is a typical situation that we're seeing in Fairfax County all over the place. I have received multiple calls and continue to receive calls and emails about the vines taking over the trees and people really curious about what we're going to do about it. And unfortunately, the Park Authority does not have enough staff, a team to be able to go out and help with managing these. We work with volunteers and we're so grateful for them because we wouldn't be able to manage situations like this otherwise. Our volunteers now are allowed to use herbicide thanks to a bill that was passed by Virginia Congress, and they use something called a sponge tip bottle or buckthorn blaster, which you can purchase on the NISMA website, National Association of Invasive Species Management, NAISMA website. And it's really convenient because you have a high concentration in that bottle. It does not leak, it does not spill usually if we used properly. And they cut the vines or stumps of shrubs or trees or even small trees and shrubs and cut them and apply herbicide to that trunk as soon as it's been cut, and it helps with controlling invasive species really rapidly. So now we'll go through some basic control methods. Of course, you will get a deeper training as we go into the other certification classes. Well, there are many methods, and it's important to choose carefully. Appropriate control methods vary by species. We need to make sure that we are looking up each species so that we know what details, exactly how to control that plant, manage that plant before starting. So we have various factors. One is the extent and the severity of this infestation. How large is infestation? How much herbicide are we going to need? How much time are we going to need to be able to manage this? How long has the invasive plant been a problem? Why would we want to ask that? Well, the seed bank in the ground. If this plant has been there a very short amount of time, great. We may not need to manage it for that many years. And that'll help you with telling the residents how long you will need to come back to manage this invasive plant. But if that invasive plant has been there for a few years, that invasive plant is going to quickly take over or it's going to continue to take over for a very long time, an extensive amount of time. So a lot of our treatment plans with our contractors, we have them for 3 to 5 years because we know that that seed bank is going to be bringing that same invasive plant back every year. Also important to know what time of year to manage that invasive plant because that plant, if it's a woody species, it may make more sense to cut and treat in the fall, winter, or wait for it to sprout up in the spring to do a foliar treatment. And we'll talk about that too, how to do those treatments. And then quality of the surrounding desirable vegetation. That means, do I really need to be careful? Can I do sort of a broad application? Can I send perhaps an employee who doesn't know all the details about natives and invasives? Or do I need somebody who has a lot of skills on identification so that they can spot treat and protect the other natives that are in that area? So we also need to know if there are other invasives that need to be treated at the same time, which also will tell me what chemicals to use and what time to be able to work in that space. So important to research each species. Here, the Blue Ridge Prism has great fact sheets about each plant. It tells you methods of control and manual or mechanical foliar treatments, herbicide, how to use basal bark treatment, how to use a cut stump treatment, and goes into all the details of when to do it and even the amount of concentration to use, I believe. So when we're doing a mechanical or manual method, we're going to be doing a hand pull. We're going to be using a saw to cut the vines. We're going to either be digging or grubbing out the root system, cutting, weed whacking, mowing, smothering, tarping, or solarizing, which could smother the plant and use the sun's rays or heat or suffocation to manage that invasive plant. So many species will resprout if we're cutting without using herbicide. And even if we're digging out the root system, you leave a tiny little piece of a root of a tree of heaven or burning bush, and those invasives will come back. Also, if we're doing this mechanical method and we're removing all the invasive vines by pulling them all up, we're also disturbing the soil, which could bring to the surface new invasives. So once you've removed one, you may cause a problem and get another invasives in that space, or you may be so lucky to be finally giving a chance for the natives that were there and just hiding out without a chance for enough light to finally germinate and come up, and then you'll see some natives having a chance to thrive. So if you are interested in getting the chemical method so that you can more easily, quickly manage invasive plants, it's really important that you have the Virginia Pesticide Applicator's license. This is required for businesses and for individuals working for businesses to be able to use herbicide. And here's an example of that sponge tip bottle or the buckthorn blaster be in use with cutting and applying to the stump of a woody plant being cut. Here's an example of a foliar treatment where the individual has a backpack on their back with the herbicide at a very low concentration. And here it looks like they're treating Japanese steelgrass. For Japanese steelgrass, you can use a glyphosate at like 0.5% of the chemical mixture, a very, very low percentage, where it won't kill other native plants, but it will damage and kill the stiltgrass. That's a really great way to manage that one. Also, for these chemical methods, you need a Virginia Pesticide Applicator's license. We'll talk a little bit about how to get that. So basal bark treatment is another really great method of killing a tree or shrub if you do not need to remove it and you can let it stay standing and it will die in place. Here you see the person applying a mixture of herbicide, which needs to be at about 20 to 25% concentration of the chemical. So it could be a triclopyr, which can be used in very cold season, and it's mixed with a dye and in oil. So it's a horticultural oil instead of water. And what this does, it allows the herbicide to stick to the trunk, to the bark, and stay there so that the herbicide may be absorbed by the bark and go into the zoem and the xylem and the phloem and kill the tree that way. Hack and squirt is another great method that can be used. Here you can see it being used on a tree of heaven. And this cuts into the trunk of the tree, leaving a piece of space of bark intact. And the herbicide is then sprayed into this opening, into this wound, to allow the herbicide to go into the system and kill the plant standing that way. So the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services is where you would go to get your pesticide applicator's license. And now there's two types. One, you have the commercial applicators for hire. This one is for use of any pesticides on other person's properties or other properties in exchange for compensation. You must work for a company with a pesticide business license. So also you can become a registered technician, and this is the first category. This is when you have not completed all the requirements for commercial certification, and you can apply for the general use pesticides without supervision. Oh, you can apply general use pesticides, I mean, without direct supervision, but you work for another company that has the pesticide applicator's license. So as a registered technician, it's easy to take by signing up for the test, and you can use this QR code to take you to the website. It's an initial, it's a train you train for an initial category, and this training should take place on the job with a certified applicator. So then you study for the you study the Virginia pesticide applicators training manuals, and you can also order this online. And the registered technician should be studying or working with a certified applicator to get the training they need to do the proper mixing, protection, cleanup, all the things. So this second layer, after you have gone through the training and have had a certain quantity of hours in the training stage as a registered technician, I believe it's like 30 hours in the field and like 20 studying the book. I believe something around there. You will then apply to take the test as a commercial pesticide applicator. Here you demonstrate that your experience and have been trained in the pesticide use. Yes, again, so at least for 1 year, or you have to have show proof of sufficient education, training, or experience in the pesticide use. So here you apply to take the test at the Office of Pesticide Services, and you usually take the test at DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles. First, super important, we take safety first. Always, always, always when we're using herbicide or near somebody using herbicide to protect ourselves, it's important to have our personal protective equipment. And this includes, and of course, depends on what is on the label. The label is the law. Some labels may say, yes, you must wear protective glasses, like when using triclopyr. Other labels, like with herbicide like glyphosate, do not have the glasses listed on there. However, I highly recommend always wearing protective glasses. This includes always wearing long sleeves and long pants, socks, and impermeable shoes. These look like hiking boots, which I don't recommend for using herbicide when treating plants with herbicide, especially for foliar applications. You may want to wear like rain boots, rubber boots that are completely impermeable. Gloves are nitrile gloves. You can even see on the label what the thickness is. And also lists here some tick protection. Make sure you're using or checking yourself for ticks every day when you're out and about. So before I go, I must make sure to mention about disposal. It is so important for landscapers working out there that you're managing the invasive weed material and just waste that is coming from the work you're doing. Sometimes it's appropriate to leave the plant matter in place for it to die back, like our volunteers will make die and dry piles, but they're monitoring these piles and they are not visible from trails or behind yards. And it's also more important, I think, when you're dealing with plants that produce a lot of seeds, to bag it. Invasive plant waste here in Fairfax County goes in the trash. It does not go in compost or yard waste in brown paper bags. It goes in trash bags and it goes into the trash. So make sure you're bagging it properly and not dumping it in the woods, because dumping plant material, including leaves in the natural areas, can cause tree damage. It can rot the root system. It can spread more invasive species. So please do not dump in the yards and natural areas behind yards. Thank you. So I mentioned a few times some early detection rapid response ideas where people are buying new invasive plants or new plants in the nurseries and not looking to see if they are invasive. Really important and key to look into this before buying. We know that early detection rapid response species, the only time that you can hope to eradicate a species is shortly after it first arrives. We have seen this plant in size fumort arrive in Fairfax County, and it is really dominating a lot of natural areas. It also grows really early in the spring, and so therefore takes over during times where our native spring ephemerals are trying to survive. The Park Authority is working on updating our early detection rapid response webpage because new invasives come pretty quickly, and we're finding more and more as we go through the growing season, and we're updating our website as quickly as we can to get that up. So now, that is the full presentation for the certification. And just really quickly, I want to go through some regulatory requirements, new things that are popping up in Virginia for you to be aware of, are really important things for you to be aware of, especially with working in sensitive environments. Like here, you have a map showing you the resource protection areas. These are environmentally sensitive land alongside or near the shorelines or streams of the rivers and other waterways. And you can find this information on the county's GIS website. You can look up the RPAs to see if you are working in the RPA. And to work in the RPA, you must have a permit to remove vegetation. Even if you're removing invasive species, you must receive a permit. And this is because we're trying to protect the Chesapeake Bay water quality, and runoff is a big issue in Fairfax County and all along the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And invasive species do not support good water quality, so ideally, yes, you're getting the permit to remove invasive species and plant natives. Resource protection areas, so any land disturbing activities in the RPA, yes, require a permit and approval from the county. So Fairfax has prepared guidance with a map showing an estimated location of RPAs, and you can use this QR code here to help you find that information, and the website for Land Development Services that where you can work on submitting a request to do the vegetation removal in the RPA. And thank you for taking that responsibility. So in Virginia, there is a code of Virginia that prohibits the invasive certain weeds on highways or right-of-ways. This is a new bill that has passed, and it says here, any owner of land adjacent to any state or other public highway or right-of-way or his agent or employees may dig up, cut down, or otherwise remove and destroy any invasive plants or weeds or other plants or weeds that may become noxious or otherwise injurious to his property found growing upon any state or other public highway right-of-way adjacent to his land. So that's good news. There's another bill that was passed that retailers must post conspicuous signage identifying invasive plants and encouraging consumers to ask about alternatives. So effective January 1st, 2027, there will be signs, and this applies to a specific list of invasive plants, of course, which are off the Department of Conservation and Recreation's invasive plant list in the Natural Heritage website. So there will be signs. So there's another mandated vegetation buffers. It's important for you to know that as HOAs and owners of commercial properties wake up to the fact that invasive plants are taking down their trees, they will need to pay to replace these. And it's important that we take charge not just to mow and blow, and trim natural areas, but to know how to manage those invasive plants that are taking over the edges of their trees. So important that we help maintain those areas, because including trees, we help to protect our water quality and manage stormwater issues. So here's another regulation for tradespeople or landscapers, landscape designers installing invasive plant species. This bill was passed, and this regulation states that the landscape designer, or tradesperson must notify the property owner in writing prior to the installation of an invasive plant species on their property. So if you're ready to earn your invasive plant management certification, please contact the Fairfax Tree Rescuers, or look up some more information also on the Plant Nova Natives website, educational resources. And if you're interested, you will receive more information coming soon for the next trainings coming up. So unfortunately, this is a recording and I cannot answer your questions, but if you reach out to the Fairfax PRISM and the contact information there, your questions will be answered. So thank you so much, and good luck with the certification, and have a great day.